Hi everyone, welcome to episode 4 of the Right on Cue podcast, filmed here at Tamworth Sports Bar. I'm your host Mark Tebbett, as per usual. Really delighted to welcome my guest this week, it's Clive Brown.
Hello Mark.
Nice to see you again. Really looking forward to this because you're such an interesting guy when you get talking. So we'll start at the beginning. How did you first get into snooker? Where did your love for the game come from?
I first saw snooker on TV back in the days when we had a black and white TV, back in I think 1980, which during the World Championship was the year of the Iranian embassy siege, which the final got interrupted for the coverage of the embassy siege. Right. And I started watching snooker from then on, and then 2 or 3 years later an old school friend of mine was training to be a GP and spent some time at Guy's Hospital in London. And we met up one day and he gave me a tour of the hospital and we went to the staff social room, which had a snooker table.
Oh, right.
And we had a frame of snooker. And that was the first time I had picked up a cue other than a few frames of pool. And then about a couple of years later, another old school friend of mine, his sister worked at a local hospital, and we went for a drink in the social club there one evening. And that also had a snooker table. We played a game. Then I moved to Somerset and back in 1984, and in January 1985 a new club opened. I found out about it only through one of the lads that I was working with. His father was one of the carpenters down there fitting it out, and I became a member of the Overpot Black Snooker Club more or less from the week it opened in January 1985, and started playing reasonably regularly and got involved in a snooker league team, and it went on from there really.
Were you any good?
I was never very good.
No.
Probably about 20 odd years ago, I had 2 51 breaks, both in a friendly match, both against the same guy. But that was a long time ago.
Yeah, mine's only 50, so we're on about the same way. You've done a lot with being involved in snooker. You were a Class 3 referee in 1990, was it you passed?
That's right, yes,
and then
March
you
1990.
I do apologise, I've had a lot of backlash for this from writing that you're a Class 3 referee when I should have put you an examiner. So everyone that's messaged me and commented saying you need to correct it, I apologise.
That's
I
right.
apologise.
Accepted.
So you achieved your Class 3 referee. Did you? And you've got billiards as well, haven't you?
Yeah, I mean, we had an examiner who played at our club, and he persuaded me to do the as was then, the Class C referees exam in the dying days of the old Billiards and Snooker Control Council, which was the governing body at the time. And a year later I did the Billiards Class 3 referee exam, but I've never really refereed billiards. I've only ever refereed one serious match, and that was one too many.
I'm not going to lie, billiards just confuses me when I'm watching it. I don't really understand it.
Billiards rules are very easy, but compared to snooker rules, but I think it's a lot harder game to referee, certainly at a good standard.
I remember I was refereeing up in, I think it might have been Gloucester or Sheffield, one of the EASB finals weekends, and they had billiards on, and I was watching it and I just couldn't get my head round it. I was watching it through this little glass bit in the door, and I was like, I don't know what's happening.
I think at the very good level it's actually quite an entertaining thing to watch, but it's probably why it doesn't appear on TV.
Yeah, possibly. And you're a tournament director as well. I know you've done a lot.
I was a referee and refereed quite a lot. One of my sort of fellow local referees in Somerset, he got involved with the EASB, the original incarnation that was set up after the fall of the SGC. It was a wholly owned subsidiary of WDBS, which I'm sure a lot of people don't realise at the time. And he was a Southwest representative on that body, and was involved as a tournament director for the Southwest, and I got involved in refereeing for most of those Southwest regional qualifiers in the days when Judd Trump was an up-and-coming young player.
Yes.
And I filled in for him TDing once or twice, and then I got asked to act as tournament director for the Disability Sports England National Championships in Swindon in, I think it was 1999 or 2000, because Leo Scullion had done it previously, but he couldn't come down from Scotland for some reason. I think he was ill or whatever, and I got asked to do that. They all liked me there, and I got asked back and developed my skills as a tournament director. And when I got involved with the EASB board back in 2006, started doing work regularly for the EASB.
Did you have a preference back then? Because obviously you were refereeing as well, doing the examining and tournament directing. Did you have a preference what you preferred?
I liked refereeing. I liked tournament director work. And I think probably the latter. I mean, particularly the sort of the bigger, busier events.
Yeah.
I love the challenge. I love to be able to sort of have to think on my feet, work it out as you go along, which challenges me. And these days, unfortunately, I suffer with back problems, which means that sort of refereeing I can't do as much of as I'd like.
Yeah, I mean, you do the seniors, don't you? You referee.
I do a little bit of work with
Jason,
seniors, yes. Mm-hmm. But it's done on the basis that I can't clean the tables. Cleaning over to brush block and iron tables is what
sweaty work as well. If you're doing multiple of them,
mm-hmm.
Get very hot doing them. So you were former committee of the World Ladies Billiards and Snooker Association.
Mm-hmm.
How did that come about? Getting involved with them?
That's a very good question. I know that sort of the previous guy who had been a regular TD for them, he retired from working with them for some reason. I can't remember quite why he wanted to withdraw from the ladies' events. And I think I sort of volunteered to sort of start TDing for them, and it more or less came as a sort of a committee post. And this is just in the last few years before they were taken under the wing of the WPBSA as it was then the World Ladies Billiards and Snooker Association, now World Women's.
So did you approach them about it, or did they just put like a post out saying that they were?
I honestly can't remember. I mean, I know that there was something I saw saying that they needed a tournament director, or whether someone had put me in contact with them. I really can't remember that now.
Okay, well, we'll move on to the next one. The World Disability, you were the co-founder.
Yeah, I mean, when I became a referee, I soon got involved with refereeing for what was then the British Wheelchair Snooker Association events, which were at events around the country. I mean, sort of Salisbury, Swindon, Keynsham, and I think one or two further field. I think Corby, was another, and got involved with a number of the players. Got known by a number of the players, and one of my referees had done some tournament director work for the Disability Sports Events National Championship for the disabled, which encompassed those with a wider range of physical disabilities. And as I say, in 1999, I think it was, when Scullion couldn't TD an event, I was asked to go along and TD, and went back and did that. Then I think 2011. So about 11 or 12 years. I think I did the DSE events, and then they basically had a couple of changes in personnel, and the people that came in didn't have the knowledge of snooker, didn't have the interest in snooker, and more or less let the snooker events wane. But there was a sort of a hard core of players that sort of played in those national championships every year. Very much a family sort of feeling to those events, and a lot of them contacted me and said, "Can't we get another event going?" And then I think it was 2013 when I and Maury Dolan, who was working at the Southwest Snooker Academy at the time, and a couple of other people, we basically organised our own national championships for the disabled, and cajoled Jason Ferguson of WPBSA to try and coordinate something. There were a couple of other bodies that were organising disability events, and it led eventually to the formation of the WDBS.
Yeah, and it's been growing quite rapidly since then. There's quite a few groups from what I recall.
There are now sort of 8 disability groups, and one of those is subdivided. But yes, I mean, I went along to the recent event in Woking 2 or 3 weeks ago, and the number of people there was a lot bigger than sort of some of the previous events. So yes, it's certainly growing.
Yeah, there's a few standouts as well. Mickey Chambers, for example, he seems to win everything.
Yeah.
Obviously, Dan Harwood, when he used to play, he used to win constantly. One of his shots he played, I've mentioned this to him loads from when I see him. He played this absolutely outrageous pink, just absolutely levered it into the yellow pocket. It was on the cushion, loads of topspin, just came off like 3 cushions, perfect on the black. It was unreal. I still can't get it out of my head now. But that's that.
But the WDBS events are very different from run-of-the-mill amateur events or professional events. I mean, they play because they really appreciate the opportunities to play against people with similar disabilities. There are a hardcore of people that turn up to those events. It's more of a family affair compared to a lot of other events.
They all seem to just get on really well. I've never seen or heard of any arguments that have.
There have been one or two over the years.
Okay. We probably won't get into that then. You started a Facebook group for the snooker and billiard rules and referees.
Indeed, yes.
It's got 5,500 members.
Something like that now. Yes.
How did you? Was that something that you just thought off the top of your head? You were like,
it was. I mean, I've always had an interest in the rules. I mean, if I do anything like that, I became a class 3 to 2 to a 1, and then an examiner, sort of more or less as quickly as I could. So I've always liked to do things to the best of my ability. I've always had an interest in the rules, and used to regularly communicate with the late great John Street, a professional referee that was on our screens quite a lot back in the sort of the 70s, 80s, and always wanted to sort of do my best to try and improve the standards of knowledge of the rules and refereeing standards. And Facebook just seemed to be a great way of trying to bring together those that were qualified to actually have an easy forum for discussing. It was intended when we first set it up to be for referees, but it's grown significantly, and now there are a lot of players on there. There are a lot of people who have an interest in cue sports generally, but and they are worldwide now. We started off for the first few years where we were almost entirely UK based in our membership, but worldwide membership now.
So was it just for them to discuss the rules, what they think might need changing, what they're struggling with?
It's surprising how many situations arise, and sometimes now on TV, particularly when you've got clips that are posted on YouTube, you can refer back to what's happened in real life events, and queries crop up, say, was the referee correct? What would you do in this situation? I mean, a lot of interesting scenarios crop up that are unusual, that even someone of my experience get the grey matter thinking. Sort of what
there's always something new coming. So whilst you're talking about with the snooker rules, you were asked to be part of a team.
I was, yes,
in 2019 to rewrite some of the rules.
Yes.
Do you remember who it was that asked you to do it?
I believe it was Brendan Moore.
Okay.
I mean, the process was led by Jan Verhaas, with Brendan and Paul Collier, and there were a number of other referees around the world, but there was a hardcore of maybe a dozen or so of us that were actively contributing. And some of the rulebook came out in August 2019, but I think it'd been a good 18 months or more of many hundreds of hours, I think, from each of us to actually sort of go through and review
was
the rules.
There any particular rules that you were thinking, well, this might need a bit of a tweak, might need changing?
There were a number of things that I had identified which had been in the rulebook since the 1995 rulebook came out, that actually contained some inconsistencies that no one had picked up, and I think there were some new definitions that we brought in, and other things that hopefully have made it clearer. And one of the other ambitions of the new rulebook was to make it easier to translate into other languages. Yeah,
excellent. So I'm just going to take a quick break from the snooker questions, because this has been something that I've wanted to ask you. I've never actually messaged you or asked you about this, so I'm going to do it now. You're obviously a smart fella. You know your stuff, and you were on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire?
Yes, 18 years ago now.
Just wanted to ask you about your experience with that, because obviously back when you were on it, it was one of the biggest game shows in the UK, and obviously it's spread across the world. How do you rate your experience doing that?
It was a fantastic day. I mean, I had been applying the process to get on the show. You had to phone in and answer a question, and if you were correct, then they would ask you to leave sort of name and number. And I used to try, if I was driving, I'd sort of phone up on the sort of the phone in the car, sort of a batch of half a dozen calls or so. I didn't know what it was. I mean, sort of £1 or so at the time for each call. So over the course of 18 months or so, I'd made half a dozen or so batches of calls. And eventually one day when I was actually out with mum and dad, and I got a phone call saying, this is the Millionaire office, sort of you're on the shortlist for Thursday's programme. And spent about 3/4 of an hour, I think, going through various things about myself and whatever, and then they asked one final qualifying question. I thought, oh dear. Okay. It was something like, according to the BBC website, what was the audio? How many people were in attendance at the World Cup match between Italy and Brazil? Right. And football is not really my sport. I think I took a stab in the dark at something like 48,000, and they said, if you're one of the nearest, we'll get back to you on Tuesday. And anyway, the following day, I actually got a phone call back saying, you were one of the closest. Oh, really? You're coming on Thursday. And it was.
Do you remember what the exact answer was, or didn't they tell you?
They never actually told me.
Oh, did I not? Well, if anyone knows, leave a comment.
I honestly can't remember whether it was Italy or Brazil, but certainly something like that.
Yeah. So that was obviously how you got onto the show. What was it like on the actual day itself?
I had a taxi to pick me up from home to take me to Taunton Station. The train was late, and I was starting to panic, and there were slow trains and non-stop trains, and I was getting confused. When we eventually did get to Paddington, there was a limousine to pick me up and take me out to Elstree, where an old school friend of mine was my friend for the day, who had just arrived. And all morning, we had people coming in and asking questions, and again in the afternoon, what would you do if you actually won £1 million? And then in the afternoon, we had to have sort of time in the studio to practice on the fastest finger, and sitting in the chair. You ask a couple of questions, and it's amazing how just sitting in that chair with no TV cameras rolling, your mind freezes. It does play havoc with your mind. I think one of my questions was, how many edges are there on a cube? And I was thinking, there's 4 up there, 4 at the bottom. Oh God, what about the sides? I'll go 50-50. But even in without the pressure of being there with Tarrant, it was still.
Did you get to meet Chris Tarrant?
We did.
Obviously, when you were in the chair, you met him.
Yeah, unusually, he didn't appear during rehearsals. I think it had been his father's funeral the day before, so we made allowance for him not showing up as he usually did. So we didn't actually see him until recording started.
Yeah, was he a nice guy?
Well, yeah, from what we saw of him.
Yeah. So, do you remember what your fastest finger question was to get into the chair?
I was hoping and praying it wasn't going to be something like put these films in order. I don't really do films, but it was put these pop artists in alphabetical order, and it was something like Cher, Sonic, Madonna, and Gabrielle. Right. So a nice, easy question.
Yeah.
And hit the button almost with such gusto that I almost stopped it flying.
I presume you weren't the only one that got it right.
I wasn't. No, I think my time was quite fast at something like 2.34 seconds.
Oh, okay.
So it's
and when they called your name out, how did you feel then?
Oh God, what have I done? It was the reality suddenly struck when they said, "And it's Clive Brown from Milminster."
Yeah. Do you remember any of the questions that you had?
I was very lucky. My £8,000 question was, which museum would you find at Yeovilton in Somerset? Well, Yeovilton at the time was only 10 miles away from where I was living, so I thought, I know this one.
So
I was very lucky. There was one question which I didn't really know the answer to, which I had to use lifelines, and another one which was my final question. But all of the others, I actually sort of knew for certain what the answers were. I wasn't torn with any of the answers, so I was quite lucky in a way.
Did you end up using all your lifelines?
I did. My final question was, the Boca Juniors play football in which country? And I think it was something like Italy, Portugal, Brazil and Argentina.
I think it's Argentina.
It is indeed Argentina. And I should have known, so I'm sure it was on the quiz machine at the Snooker Club at the time, so I should have known. But I used a 50-50, and my claim to fame is that my fastest finger was actually Jeremy Kyle. And he actually knew the answer, but he repeated it 2 or 3 times, and each time he was
Oh, you phoned a friend?
I did phone a friend, yeah.
Was Jeremy Kyle?
Yep.
As in the host, Jeremy
Yes,
Kyle?
indeed, yeah.
Oh,
And
wow.
his confidence was waning, and I thought, oh God, I'll have to go 50-50. So, and yeah, I think Argentina and one of the Italy, I think, was left or something like that. So I think I was pretty sure it was a South American team.
Yeah,
but, So yeah, and then I had a film question for my 32,000, which I hadn't got a clue. So
you took the money.
I took the money and run.
Well, no, that's the smart thing to do. You don't want to risk that sort of money, do you? So anyway, thank you for answering my millionaire questions. So we've got a question from Michael Waring, who we both know. It's quite a long one, so you might have to bear with me on this. There was talk at one time of having a qualification for referees to just do local snooker league events. Do you know if there are any plans for this to continue with? And in his opinion, rather than go to Class 3 level, he believes that many leagues would like to have better trained pool of referees rather than just volunteers they rely on.
Yeah, I mean, sort of, it's an interesting question. The short answer is no, I don't know. Okay. But it's certainly been something that I've been advocating that we need to do more for entry-level referees. Unfortunately, the last incumbent of the Director of Referees post with the EASB and the guy that sort of took on the mantle of running the EPSB both seemed keen to concentrate on recruiting referees who were going to be officiating for the national governing body, and they weren't really sort of interested, it seems, in people who only wanted a referee at local level. And I've had many discussions with both of them saying we really need to make sure we've got a pool of referees at local level. A lot of guys only want to referee at local level. They're only interested in doing local league or local club stuff. Even if they've got ambitions to go beyond that, they need to find their feet at local level. You can't chuck them in at the deep end and expect them to perform at the level required, really. At national events, there aren't sufficient national events to really provide sufficient opportunities for lots of new referees coming through the system.
I mean, I presume that a lot of the referees nowadays start off refereeing in their local leagues. That's when I used to play in the league years and years ago. That's how I sort of got interested in the refereeing side and actually really enjoyed doing it at the local level. That's why years after I thought, maybe give it a try. But I presume that people still enjoy doing.
Yes, and I think there's a lot of players, a lot of referees, to come through that way. I mean, they want to show that they've actually got something to back up, sort of their refereeing skills. And they've actually got a certificate to say that they do actually know the rules. And again, there are a lot of players that have come through the system over the years that want to give themselves a competitive edge against their competitors to actually sort of know the ins and outs of the rules. I mean, certainly can give you some advantage at times.
So I'm going to go on to the next bit now, which Jason Smith has asked, and I'm sure many others are interested in this, but do a little bit of a background on it before I ask Jason's question. The Pink Ribbon, the biggest pro-am in the country.
In the world.
In the world. Yeah, because you get people flying from all over to enter, which is for breast cancer, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. So it's obviously going for a great cause. You were the tournament director.
Not for the first 2 years. I did some refereeing during the first 2 years, but the guy that had done year 2 couldn't do year 3. I think he was abroad with one of the international events, so I was asked to go along and do that, and got saddled with it after that for the following 8 years.
Well, you said you like a challenge.
I do, and I mean, some of the most enjoyable parts of snooker have been the hardest work. And I mean, sort of, I wasn't just tournament director. I mean, sort of, I more or less took it from the stage of being given an entry list of players and did all the sort of the draws and the scheduling and everything else. And I absolutely thoroughly enjoyed it. It was hard work. It was all
late nights as well.
Okay, absolutely. And but the players were there because they wanted to be there, which always helps. Rather than thinking, oh God, I've got to be here to keep my ranking points. And it was a great cause and fantastic atmosphere. Everyone's always absolutely loved the Pink Ribbon events. And there were 10 of them, and hopefully this year we will be resurrecting it at a club in the Midlands.
Because it was such a shame that Southwest Snooker Academy closed in Gloucester because it was a lovely club.
One of the best in the country.
Yeah, and when I remember reading that it was closing down, my first thought was, what about the Pink Ribbon? I've never been to the Pink Ribbon, but I'd obviously read about it, seen videos, and it's such a great cause, and it was such a shame that the club had to close.
Yeah.
But you've just said, for everyone,
it will be back this year.
That it's coming back. So Jason's question is, do you have an update on the Pink Ribbon?
I tried to speak to. I think it's now general knowledge that it's being planned to be held at the Landywood Snooker Club,
lovely club.
Between Walsall and Cannock.
Yeah.
So a nice central location. They have 12 tables, including 4-star tables.
Yeah.
Paul Lloyd is the manager or owner there, and very, very keen to make this to work.
Yeah.
So I did try and speak to him earlier on, but respective phone signals weren't playing ball, so I didn't actually get to speak. But there will be further updates shortly, hopefully, and so things will be going ahead.
Was it yourself that thought, right, Gloucester's obviously not available anymore, I want to keep doing this?
Well, yes, I mean, sort of back at the beginning of 2020, did try to sort of look at other venues, but it didn't sort of quite work out at that stage.
Yeah.
And then with lockdown and the pandemic, I mean, the last couple of years have more or less sort of put paid to any ideas of that. I mean, this was actually sort of Paul Lloyd actually approached me. I mean, he spoke to various people about running Pink Ribbon, and everyone kept mentioning my name. Have you spoken to Clive? So eventually he thought
you're the man.
He ought to speak to me. So I mean, hopefully we will be getting that sort of all going through later. So we're looking at the beginning of July for that one.
Okay, so how long does it take for you to organise such a big event like that?
I only came in at the stage more or less as when I was presented with a list of entries and took it from there. I mean, quite a lot of hours go into that. I mean, it's relatively easy to actually do the draw, but then trying to sort of schedule things.
Yeah.
I mean, where you have got players who are perhaps playing in one half, or the last match or last couple of matches on a one night at 11 o'clock. You don't want them playing at 9 o'clock the following morning. So trying my best to try and avoid scheduling them so that they do that, and then sort of scheduling so that if they come through in both halves, they're unlikely to be playing at the same time.
I was going to say, because the draw's a bit different than just a straight knockout. It's more of a double elimination sort of job, isn't it?
Yeah, it does make it very difficult. And again, I mean, sort of it's is made slightly more difficult because we have to allow for the fact that we're not going to have the right number of pros. I mean, sort of we might bring pros in, say, at around a 128, but you might only have 40 odd pros. So you've got to make up the other sort of 70 odd with the amateurs coming through through the sort of qualifying stages. So it does make the draws. You're actually aiming to get maybe 23 qualifiers in the top half, so it's not the normal sort of 4-16-32 type draw.
So people just pay their money, don't they? They don't have to go through any sort of qualifying for it. It's
absolutely no qualifying.
Pay your money
actually pay the money and come along and wear a pink shirt.
Yeah, do they? I was going to ask about that. Because obviously they all wear the pink shirts. Is that like an official top that they
No, I mean it was something that sort of Paul Mount, who ran Southwest Snooker Academy and set up the event back in 2010. He wanted everyone to be wearing pink to show their support for sort of the charity. Yeah. And it's certainly something I think that we would want to sort of carry on, because it is part of Pink Ribbon. Yeah. I think sort of everyone wearing pink. But
there we go, folks. The Pink Ribbon's coming back, which is just brilliant news.
And I have to say, I mean, sort of after a meeting I had back in December with Paul, I posted a teaser post on Facebook, and the number of likes ended up